So let's talk about how fearful avoidant attachment styles, aka disorganized attachment style individuals, tend to notice any change in a pattern almost immediately. And if you were the partner or a loved one of a fearful avoidant, you should know that they are basically human lie detectors. And they don't even try to be. So let's talk about why this happens, what some of the effects are for the fearful avoidant themselves, and some really important things to take into consideration. And then we will talk about what you can actually do on either side of this. So, first and foremost, the fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment style, the reason that they are human lie detectors is because they grow up in environments where that becomes their attachment strategy. Let's take a look here for a second. When you look at the anxious preoccupied attachment style, there's a sense of consistency in knowing that when the AP is connecting to their caregivers, their needs will be met. So the AP sees consistency enough where they're like, oh, if I go towards my caregiver and try to connect with them, this anxious style can maintain proximity. And when they do, it creates relief. So there's this consistency in knowing even if my parents work a lot, for example, when they're close by, things go well. Dismissive avoidance. There is still consistency in realizing that their emotional needs will not be met. So it makes it predictable and it makes it easy for them to adapt to that environment by being like, okay, I will just diminish thinking or feeling that I need to connect deeply with people. And by doing that, I find myself creating relief. So essentially, the dismissive avoidant has enough consistency in knowing that where they can create space and that gives them relief. There's consistency on both sides here in relationship to the child's attachment to their caregivers. The securely attached person, there's consistency in the relationship all around. So they have the sense of security in the relationship overall. The fearful avoidant is the only attachment style that tends to have tremendous inconsistency across all fronts. So let's look at some examples. Let's say, for example, that there is a fearful avoidant with a caregiver or parent who is an alcoholic. Well, what are you going to see? One day that child comes home and the parent is in a great mood because they're drinking and they're a little tipsy and happy and full of life. And another day that child comes home and the parent is in a really bad mood. They drank too much and now they're an angry drunk. And then another day, the parent is sobering up and they're in a really bad mood because they're going through withdrawals and it's really tricky. And another day, the parent's been sober for a few days and they're in a great mood. There is so much inconsistency in the fearful avoidance childhood that essentially that is the consistent. It's like they can consistently predict inconsistency. And if you look at other versions of what might make somebody be fearful avoidant, if there's a lot of lying or manipulation in the household, if there's a parent who has a mental health issue or any sort of personality disorder, if there is a lot of fighting or arguing and a lot of chaos in the home, any of these different things are most likely to produce a fearful avoidant attachment style. And you can see how much there is so much inconsistency. You never know what you're going to get. So essentially what happens to the fearful avoidant attachment style is they learn if I walk on eggshells and I read between the lines and I get really good at reading between the lines, then all of a sudden, this is going to become my attachment strategy. That is my only way of getting consistency in some form, is to consistently get really good at predicting people's patterns of behavior and noticing any little incongruencies or changes that are happening in their micro expressions, in their body language, in their tone of voice, in where they usually are when I come home from school versus where they are now, in, where the car is parked. And, there's so many different factors that they start. And this is not a conscious thing. This is not something the child considers consciously at a young age. It's a way they learn to subconsciously adapt to their environment as a safety strategy, as a survival strategy. And so fearful avoidance in their adult lives have that's what their attachment strategy is. Their attachment strategy is hypervigilance. And so, AKA reading between the lines at all costs. So, what ends up happening is fearful avoidance, they notice everything. Their mind has been training to notice everything for years and years and years. They are deeply conditioned to notice all of these little nuances of human patterns of behavior. On one hand, that can be a gift. On one hand, that can make them very adept at understanding and relating to other attachment styles, other people from different backgrounds and dynamics. On the downside, and this is the really important part, the hypervigilance itself is not necessarily negative. It's not negative to be hyper attuned to people. That can be a great positive. But when it is coupled with a dysregulated nervous system or a lot of negative subconscious assumptions as to what will go wrong or what bad things could happen, this is where it becomes a lot of suffering. And this is where it actually takes on kind of a life of its own and can create a lot of volatility in a relationship. So let's say, for example, let's say somebody notices a change in somebody's mood that they're dating or a change in the pattern of how much this person is texting. If you are not giving really negative meaning to it, if you don't have all these core wounds where you're making it mean, oh, they're going to leave the relationship, they're no longer interested in me, if you're not storytelling around it, and if it doesn't dysregulate your nervous system where you go into this like upregulated state of like low level panic or extreme suspicion and anxiety, if you are not in that space, then you can say, hey, I noticed something's off. Is everything good? Like, or hey, I noticed you're a little off this week, just checking in, wanted to make sure everything's okay. You can address it in a really healthy way. But if instead there is a big fear behind it, an assumption made, and a dysregulated nervous system, and one and two there really go hand in hand, then all of a sudden what happens instead is it can create a lot of negative assumptions on the fearful avoidance part. So they start fearing, they start thinking something bad's going to happen. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it causes them to feel really, really disrupted in their relationship. Now, when this is happening all the time to fearful avoidance, it's a major contributor to their volatility because they're constantly walking on eggshells, fearing, noticing, giving meaning to things, feeling dysregulated in fight or flight mode. And when this consistently happens, it creates a lot of havoc just waiting to, play into the relationship because there's a lot of disruption happening inside the inside world of the fearful avoidance mind. Now, what's really important to recognize is that if you are the fearful avoidant listening to this, it's not your fault, right? These are a whole bunch of strategies your subconscious mind adopted. And yet it is your responsibility. It is so important because only you can really fix all of these negative assumptions, these fear-based pieces of meaning. It's really up to you to be able to facilitate change in that arena. And so it's of the utmost importance that you're like, hey, I'm going to show up for this. I am going to do this inner work and reprogramming. I'm going to learn to regulate my nervous system, and I'm going to learn to communicate in healthy ways about the things that I notice. And I'm going to learn to question my worst case scenario assumptions, because what painful scenarios might have happened in childhood, like a fight's about to erupt and a big argument's about to take place. Instead, you may experience, that somebody's pattern has changed and you could just have a healthy conversation. So your mind goes and it projects your past painful experiences onto the present because that's how the subconscious mind works in part. But that doesn't necessarily represent what the situation could be more objectively. And so sometimes fearful avoidants lose the capacity to have healthy outcomes a lot more frequently because they get stuck in these old reprojections of past wounds and past experiences. And it's almost like they can make their current relationship to their parents or sorry, to their partner be a direct reflection of the relationship to their parents. And it can also be from past relationships. So it's so important to recognize this. Now, if this is something you struggle with and you're like, hey, this is me, and you want to do a deep dive into how to reprogram those old pieces of meaning, those old fears, that feeling of like waiting for the other shoe to drop, you can check out the Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course for 7 days for free using the link down below. And it will give you access to exactly the roadmap that you need. It's a 2-hour course. You can get through it very quickly, definitely in under 7 days. And it will give you the exact roadmap you need to move the needle on this problem in your relationship. So if you're tired of feeling upregulated and worried and stressed, and you want to be able to notice the red flags and be hypervigilant, but address them in a healthy way that leads to healthy outcomes, you have to reprogram these old belief patterns, these old fears that you're reprojecting. It will not take away the ability to recognize red flags. It won't take away the upside of hypervigilance. It will keep that attunement, but it will take away all the negative things that come with it on the downside. And it's such an important part of healing and of growth. So learning to understand that this is your subconscious mind at work and that there's a way of reconditioning this and uprooting this is a huge, huge step to fearful avoidance healing and becoming secure, and will also create a tremendous amount of relief in your personal life and in your relationships in a short period of time. So I have some exciting news, which is that we are doing $1,000 off of our lifetime membership sale to the Personal Development School, which means you get access to literally everything at PDS for your entire rest of your life. Essentially, that entails all of our different courses you have lifetime access to. I do 4 live webinars a week, every single week. You can access them ongoing, and you get access to all of our daily community events. So I'd love to see you on the other side, and you can access it by using the link in the description box below. So I hope this all makes sense. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to check out that course down below. And that's it for today. If you're enjoying this channel, I make daily videos here. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the notification bell down below so you don't miss any daily content. And I look forward to seeing you in future videos.